No, I never heard of it.
Yes, I have heard of it. And I must say, I don't understand very much about it.
I've never heard of Asperger's.
Well, what I think it is that you can get a fixation on something. You know, that'd be as good as I could explain it.
Asperger's is part of the autism thing, and it's about people that can be quite smart in one way, but they're just a little bit off the wall.
You are listening to a programme called The Misunderstood. My name is Nigel Murphy. So who are the misunderstood?
I'm Catherine, and I have Asperger's, but I like to call myself an Aspie.
I'm Mary. I'm 27 and I have Asperger syndrome. I was diagnosed only 5 years ago in October 2006.
My name is Kieran. I have Asperger syndrome and I was diagnosed at the age of 41.
Currently, there are up to 16,000 people in Ireland who have Asperger syndrome. And more often than not, they feel misunderstood. So what exactly is it?
Well, Asperger syndrome is a neurological condition.
That's Dr. Rita Honan, whose area of expertise is Asperger syndrome.
It just means that some of the sequences in your brain work a bit differently than it does in people who do not have the condition. For example, if I ask you to do something and you have Asperger syndrome, it might be that the messages, we all learn about neurons in school and things, that some of those messages or chemicals don't get exactly where they're supposed to go, and so it's hard for the person with the condition to really maybe comprehend or understand what it is that's expected from them.
This programme is looking at the experience of those who have the condition and who are mid-20s and upwards. There's a reason for this.
I would say it was only in the 90s that children were likely to get a diagnosis of Asperger syndrome. And of course, everybody seen before that would not have had that opportunity, which is why many adults are now coming and asking, could they possibly have the condition?
That is Dr. Emer Philbin-Bowman, a psychiatrist and psychologist who has a special interest in Asperger syndrome.
Hans Asperger first wrote about what he called autistic psychopathy of childhood in 1944, published in German. In fact, Asperger's paper wasn't fully translated until 1991. And I suppose you could say that the professionals seeing children didn't really begin to have a grasp of it for another 10 years. So I would say it was only in the 90s that children were likely to get a diagnosis of Asperger syndrome.
Crazy, isn't it? So for a huge proportion of Irish people with this syndrome, diagnosis inevitably was to come very late. Such late diagnosis brings with it its own set of problems.
I realised I was different when I was in third class. I was unaware as to why the class were excluding me and, inverted commas, punishing me. I also became more aware in third class onwards how much I really wanted a friend and that I wasn't mixing very well with the class like I should be. My mother was also worried for me as well, that I'd been bullied so much and called names, which is very upsetting. They called me loony bin and loony and retard and handicapped, and that would hurt an awful lot. Primary school I was especially bullied by two boys who lay in wait for me every time I'd go in every day, and after school every day as well, and as a result I ended up with severe depression at 12 and a half years old. It was really when I was in college, right, in the postgraduate year after an abusive situation, that I fully realised that I had something that was stopping me from making friends and finding partners.
That's Mary, who is now 27 but spent years trying to figure out why she felt the way she did. Someone said to us when we were researching this programme that not only were the people with AS misunderstood, their parents were too.
I didn't seem to be able to sort of put my finger on it really, what was the problem.
That's Brenda, who is a parent of someone with Asperger's.
It took a long time, really. It took maybe into kind of primary school before she was even assessed. Only for the school and ourselves. She probably wouldn't have been assessed because there was nobody there to kind of, you could go to and ask questions or find out anything, really. So, I mean, like even at 11, 12, like we were told to take her home and do the best we could, that she just had a learning disability and That was it. So, like, it was a long time. Like, I mean, it was literally, she was, 19 before she was assessed for autism. Very, very frustrating, because you just felt you didn't feel you could help. You didn't know what you were supposed to be doing. You just knew that you were trying to support her, you were trying to give her advice. But you felt like you were on your own. You really basically felt on your own. You didn't feel like you had anyone you could actually turn to and ask for help.
So, when those with the condition finally got a diagnosis, what was that like?
It was kind of a relief in a way, because it was kind of like, okay, I always kind of knew, but now I knew everyone else would be able to know. Everyone else would stop just calling me crazy or weird, and like, no, there's a reason behind this. Like, and I knew then that I could start working on like fixing things, like not fixing, but getting better at socialising and stuff, and getting there slowly. And yes, it was a relief.
It was a mixture of feelings. It was good to find out what had been holding me back in my life, and equally it was a shock to me to discover that I had a mild form of autism.
When I finally found out I'd Asperger's, I felt half scared and half relieved. I finally found a name to what was causing all the trouble for me. But as well, I was scared for my future, and I kind of broke down crying the first night I found out.
It's Sunday afternoon, and I'm here in a certain pub in Dublin to meet members of the Asperger's group that gather here every week. The venue may be very informal, with people sitting down having a drink, but the connection with others with Asperger's is absolutely invaluable.
I set up the Sunday group in 2002 because I felt there was a need for a group to support people, adults with Asperger syndrome.
That is Dr. David Jordan, who coordinates the Sunday group.
There wasn't any group or any social outlet for adults with Asperger's at all in Ireland. And when I was diagnosed with Asperger's in 2002, I felt that I needed a group to attend, and I wanted to meet other people with Asperger's. I wanted to see what they were like and to see if there was similarity in me, and also try and support people, because of course Asperger's can be a very isolating condition. And it became a group where people attended where they could make friends. And even now we have people who have found boyfriends and girlfriends and ended up couples. So it's become very beneficial to the people who attend. And we've had maybe a good few hundred, maybe a couple of hundred people have come to the group over the years. So it's worked out very well.
So Sean, tell me, why do you come to this group?
Well, obviously to meet people. I don't meet many people other than at work, and I'm trying to socialise. I need to do it pretty badly. I've been coming to this group since March 2007, I think, and I've made a few friends, all right, and I get to have a dinner, and I listen to the conversation. Some of it's very funny and wild and wicked, and kind of enjoy myself, you know.
I come here to meet people of my own kind, and it's good to have this club because since the death of my father 2 years ago, I was at a loose end most Sundays for someone to spend time with on a Sunday afternoon, so that problem is now solved since joining this group, and I'm very, very grateful to have this group in my life.
What is interesting about having been in the pub with the Asperger's group is that on the face of it, they look and sound like any other group of people. However, if you take away the pub scenario and put them into a room without such ambient noise and distraction, well then you may very well see behaviour that is a little bit different. So let's take a step backwards for a moment. How would one recognise somebody with Asperger syndrome? Well, let's look initially at the physical traits that are synonymous with the condition.
Very often I say to parents, if somebody saw your child walking along the opposite side of the street, would they be different in any way? And it's extremely common for parents to describe, well, not enormously, but they walk with perhaps a hunched up kind of fast pace, as sort of tense, giving a kind of tense impression. And they'll say as well that sitting in a chair, the person is often very almost military in the way that they sit. Or they'll have little repetitive habits. Maybe it might be pulling at something that they're wearing, or tapping with their hand on their knee, or there might be a facial grimace, an unusual facial movement, or perhaps touching their hair and maybe a little pulling movement. Then, of course, the other thing is, if you say to parents, is there anything unusual you notice about their speech? The first thing, I think the most common thing that people will say is that speech is monotone, that it's not expressive, that it won't necessarily, if something sad or something happy happens, that will not be reflected in the person's speech, and that it's boring. Very often people will say that it's either too loud or too low.
So, on the face of it, you can see why people have defined those with Asperger's as a little odd or a little strange, just from their physical attributes. But Asperger's is defined as a social disability, and the biggest area where the disability lies is in the learning how to behave appropriately. Now that's the crux.
Any disability is characterised by an inability to fully participate in society.
That is Professor Michael Fitzgerald, who is the Henry Marsh Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Trinity College Dublin, and has an expertise in all areas of autism.
The problems with people with Asperger's syndrome is that they have problems social relating, they tend to be loners, they have problems with eye contact, they have problems reading minds, they have problems in reciprocal social conversation. By what I mean is they have problems with the practical use of language, and by in their language they don't give enough social context to the listener to be able to know precisely what they're saying. And they often have very narrow interests, and they're often very talented. People in this country like De Valera had it, Beckett had it, James Joyce had it, and so they can be extremely talented, but then many of them, unfortunately, they get ostracised at school, they get bullied at school, they get suspended often from school. If they go to university, they have a tendency to drop out in the first year from university. They have a tendency, because of all these difficulties, to get depressed. But if they're given support, then they can go right through school, and the sky's the limit if they're given adequate support and if people give them a sympathetic understanding.
Hans Asperger called the children he met who had Asperger's as little professors, mainly because of their ability to talk about their favourite subject in great detail. Now, when he said the words "in great detail," you actually could go as far as calling the interest obsessive. So let's now hear about some people's fascination with very weird, odd items or topics.
Well, I'm obsessed with Beryl the Pearl and the Topper Book. I'm obsessed with the Munsters, the Addams Family, test cards. I loved them since I was in second class. That's how my parents noticed I was different, and my nanny, they'd wonder what I'd seen in a picture of a little girl with her noughts and X's, or a picture of colours on RTE and a bow coming out of it. I also I've got into recently is the chimes from clocks and different melodic noises I get relaxed by. I have a little reborn doll called Lydia who I really love as well.
Now, let's face some facts here. There is nothing wrong with having a particular interest, but when you spend huge amounts of time immersed in the interest, and then in turn huge amounts of time telling others about it, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, there was a time when I first went to Trinity College, back in 1997. I thought that everybody in Trinity College was much like myself, into science and philosophy and mineral collecting. And that wasn't the case.
That's Dr. David Jordan again.
But before I realised that, I remember going to the table tennis club in Trinity College, and the person I was playing against table tennis I learnt was doing philosophy. So I got really excited, and on the way back to the train station, I started to talk philosophy. Actually, I probably started talking philosophy as soon as I heard that he studied philosophy while I was playing table tennis, but I never shut up. I was walking all the way to the train station, and he was trying to walk away from me, leave me behind, and I wasn't even going to get a train. I needed to get a bus instead. I remember him asking me, "Are you going to train as well?" And I said no, but I continued walking with him. And probably the question he asked me, are you going to get a train as well? It was a polite way of saying, I'm finished talking to you now.
Social cues are basic to how we interact with others, and people with Asperger's find them very difficult to interpret. So what exactly are social cues?
Social cue is something that's very subtle.
That's Dr. Rita Honan again.
It's something, say, the look of an eye, or the facial expression that somebody makes, a grimace if they're not happy, or they turn their body sideways, or there's a bunch of kids together and they're kind of huddled, and if I looked at it, I'd say, well, those kids don't want anybody else to join them. But if I had Asperger syndrome, I may not be able to figure that all I see is a bunch of kids. And I don't get that they're not happy today or that they don't want me to join them because I can't read their body language. David Jordan refers to it as social dyslexia, right? So it's not being able to read body language, facial expressions very well.
But the problem is that if you cannot read other people's body language or interpret from them, through their words, what they really want, it leads to difficulties with relationships and problems within social settings.
What makes you human is the capacity to speak to other humans, to read their eyes, to read their faces, to read their minds, to communicate your feelings. They can cut across people in conversation because they're not paying attention often to what other people are saying. They're only interested in speaking about their own interest, which they can go on ad nauseum, and they will talk forever about their special interest. They're not aware of that the other person is really existing. So in treatment, they have to be able to look at people's faces, look at their eyes, look at the reaction of other people, and they have to say normally in conversation you say something and then you stop and you allow the other person to say so, and they have to practice this turn taking in conversation, and particularly picking up the cues from the body language and from the eyes and face, etc.
Unfortunately, such isolation and loneliness is absolutely rampant in the Asperger's community.
Most of the young children are included with their friends, and it's around adolescence, around 11, 12 years of age, when kids want to be just like everybody else. Not that everybody is, but they think they are, that they start to be left out because they're not able to they're probably not interested in a lot of the things, like the boys in Ireland. Ireland is sports mad. They're soccer mad, football mad, hurling mad. And people with Asperger tend not to have very good motor coordination, and also would find it very confusing to be in a sports game. And so they tend to start being left out. So for some kids and some teenagers even, they don't mind. They're very happy in their own company. They have very strong interests. But for others, it can be very painful.
Social isolation basically is horrible. Like, as a child it wasn't so bad because, well, it was bad. I had no friends, but I could kind of disappear into my own world, and that was kind of acceptable when I was a kid. But going on to like secondary school, having no friends, or having friends but friends that didn't understand me, or friends that I didn't understand them, so it was like we were more like acquaintances rather than friends because we didn't connect. I found that if I told someone I had Asperger's, they'd be like, oh, you're just stupid, or you're a freak. Some of them would also make friends with me, but in a way it was as if they were making friends with me because they wanted someone to victimise. The bully's choice for a friend to bully, if that makes sense, which was horrible. Socialisation's still really hard because I don't know how to connect with people. I don't understand the social chit-chat. The most simplest things are the hardest things to start a conversation about, I find. It's really lonely.
So what happens to the psychological well-being of someone with Asperger's who experiences intolerance, sneers, castigation, or bullying by others because of their social behaviour?
Many people with Asperger syndrome have mental health problems, in particular depression. It's estimated that about 1 in 3 have a clinical depression. There are many possible explanations for that: feeling unaccepted, misunderstood, the loneliness, particularly when you when you want to be with other people, as some Asperger's people do. Being bullied at school is extraordinary and has an extraordinary effect. The exhaustion of trying each day to make things work and failing.
But social isolation, both in childhood and adulthood, can lead to other issues associated with mental health.
Yeah, there are a couple of other challenges that a lot of people, probably most people on the autism spectrum face, and that would be these obsessive, not the obsessive interests necessarily, but obsessive behaviors. And some folks actually have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Everybody doesn't necessarily have that, but when you've got that, and particularly this rigid mindset, it can result in problems with other people, problems getting a job, problems getting anything done, disorganization in your day. And part of it is, I think, that there's a need for sameness in autism. It's even part of the diagnostic criteria, that there's a need. I need to know what's going to happen. It has to be done in a particular way. But that over time can become really, really stressful for the person themselves as well as other people in their environment. The most powerful intervention, I think, is a more normalized lifestyle, which brings us back to how does that happen? That's up to us. That's up to our NTs, our neurotypicals. How do we bring these guys into the fold and not leave them off in these distressful places that they go because of the way their brain is wired?
Now, most people are well supported by family and services. However, what must be mentioned is that some have fallen through the cracks, ended up homeless, alcohol dependent, in prison, and even in psychiatric hospitals. Now, a psychiatric hospital is a good place to be if you need to be there. But what about if your Asperger's is misunderstood and you are misdiagnosed?
It happens with great frequency, actually. I recall doing a home visit on a teenage boy one day, and he was communicating to me via notes. He was writing notes and putting them under the door or whatever, and I was interviewing his mom. And I spent quite a number of hours there in his home, and it was quite clear to me, and I had spoken with the people at the school, it was quite clear he met all of the characteristics of Asperger syndrome. And the very next day, the mother called me highly distressed. She had brought him in for a routine 3-monthly, I think it was, checkup to a psychiatrist. He saw a registrar who very likely wouldn't have been familiar with the condition, and I suppose he was so unusual to her that she actually hospitalized him for schizophrenia because she thought he had a thought disorder, and it wasn't a thought disorder, it was autism.
But whatever way people act out when stressed, people with Asperger's just want to fit in, to have a sense of belonging, to be treated the same as everyone else, to have a family, a loving partner and a job. They mostly want what the average person in society expects.
My main worry at the moment is getting a partner sometime in the future, because I found that any women I had dates with didn't stay with me for too long. Maybe I didn't meet the right one yet, but hopefully something will happen for me in the near future, though I know I must not be anxious about this, because anxiety or too much anxiety will only frighten off a prospective partner.
I worry about putting on weight, I worry about lots of things. Will I ever marry her? That's another worry. I don't think I'm going to get married, past the age now, and I feel probably wouldn't be able to talk to somebody properly, or cook a meal properly, or for two people, because that's kind of expected in a household, that the husband should be able to cook something. But I don't think I could do it for two people, or how to meet someone. I don't know. I need a secure job to meet someone, and you can't really meet somebody without having a secure job. I'm still only doing a course or CE scheme, and it doesn't look like I'll be able to meet anyone for a while, and that kind of gets me down. So I don't let on, I don't say that to my brothers or sisters, because they wouldn't understand. They don't seem to understand my personal feelings. I was there at a dinner yesterday with my brother and his wife, and I couldn't say all this to him, so I just had to talk about politics again. That's the only thing I can talk to my brother about. With personal feelings don't come into it. So I'm worried all the time about the future.
People with Asperger syndrome have, as we already said, extreme difficulty in forming or maintaining social relationships. This can be very upsetting for those who long for companionship and belonging, and often leads to obsessive online dating and engagement with people who may not be very suitable. But this is not the case for at least 2 people in the Sunday group. Let's hear from Karen and Chris.
We met here at the Longstones pub on the 12th of October, so we have that special date now every anniversary. We kind of blossomed from there, just went from strength to strength. Then
I always thought that I would never meet anyone, and so I was very depressed when I came in. But when I met Chris, he has such a wonderful glow about him, and that he's so sincere and so compassionate about everything that he talks about, and that it's so lovely that when 2 different people meet together and then they sort of merge, it's just so lovely.
What you must remember is that those with Asperger's spend their lives trying to overcome their deficits. The ordinary person does not need to be fearful of them, and like any disability that anyone may have, understanding reduces fear and in turn reduces stigma. We are each responsible for how we behave towards one another, and those with Asperger's are constantly trying to address this. The question is, are you? My name is Nigel Murphy. Thanks for listening. A special thanks to all those who helped in the making of this programme, and they are Aspire, Positive Behaviour Ireland, Tishkent, the Sunday Group, and all our contributors. This programme has been kindly funded through the Sound and Vision Scheme, which is a funding scheme from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland.